Thanks for inviting me on, Larry, and looking forward to chatting with you about everything.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Brett. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing good. I was just complaining that it's 55 and drizzly in Southern California. This is a terrible weather day for us. We're a little soft out here on the West Coast.
Hey,
Yeah,
stop complaining. It's 25 degrees here. So,
right, yeah, exactly. That's the other fun part of all this kind of Zoom nonsense. We get to check in with each other all over the country, all over the world in some cases too. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's just great that we're still able to connect. I would probably argue even greater with Zoom or other virtual technologies. It's just allowed us to connect more with our friends, families, and just even with people we do business with and business.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But thanks for connecting. I think we probably owe Twitter, I guess, to the connection. I think that was where we first, touched base and kind of got the conversation rolling.
Yeah, who would have known you would kind of find your friends or your business partners or just overall friendships through Twitter or social media in general? I would have never guessed if you asked me that 10 years ago.
Yeah, it cracked me up. My last birthday, I was thinking about who I wanted out, and a few people that came front of mind were like insurance buddies all over the country. It was weird. I was like some people I'd never even met in real life. I was like, oh man, I love to hang out with those guys. But
Yeah, yeah. And I think setting up that cycling group and that running cycling page is just great. I think it's to allow more people to connect personally, but also professionally as well.
yeah, Larry's mentioned our InsurTech runners group on Strava. We're 40 strong now. It's a sneaky, awesome group too. Really talented, driven professionals. In hindsight, it makes sense. If you're going to nerd out, run, use one of these to track your data, see how you're doing. You're probably going to be a pretty strong professional too. I know. Kind of ahead of this, I kind of jumped the gun a little. Mentioned personal and professional training, on Twitter and LinkedIn. Yeah, it turns out the people who run hard also work pretty darn hard. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely think it's a correlation with fitness and business, especially for those. I think if you look at any successful person or business person, in some aspect of their lives, they're physically active, whether they play golf or
Mhm.
they run or cycle, what have you, or just play around with the kids. I mean, they're physically moving their bodies and their heart's pumping. And I think there's a big correlation between being great at business and fitness.
I could see that, keep that engine up. And that kind of winds us back to our friend Matthew Queen on Twitter. Speaking of the Twitter community, was asking us, when we said that we'd be chatting about pipeline management and sales success. And, between the two of us, I very much admittedly am figuring out the sales game, figuring out the insurance game. I've got a smattering of clients here and there, but, thank you for, being willing to chat today. And I guess to our buddy Matthew's question, as much as we talked about technology, maybe what in the tech world and what in just the classic sales world have you been successful? Have you kind of built out your book and your practice? I appreciate you taking the time today to rap about everything. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a great question, and I think it just at the end of the day, no matter what type of business I've been in, and I've been responsible for a book of business or just overall client relationship, I think it just goes back to just the relationship aspect of it, and kind of cultivating relationships and just furthering improving upon the partnerships that you have with external center
Mhm.
influences, the referral sources, etc. But I think it just goes back to that relationship building and cultivating those relationships. I think the communication piece and staying in contact and just checking in from time to time, I think it really goes a long way. I think one of the things
Mhm.
that COVID has definitely happened, and especially working from home and in the pandemic, is I think it's kind of further put us away from those relationships. But like we talked about earlier, with the virtual technologies, and I think those we can still continue those connections in a
Mhm.
different way. But at least we're still in contact with our relationships that we have, and we're top of mind. Because I always had the perspective out of sight, out of mind,
Yep.
and I can't expect that a year from now, if I never made contact with someone that I have a partnership with, for them to remember me if something were to come their way. And so it's always kind of being top of mind, whether that be social media or that be just ongoing connections that you have. One of my close partnerships that I have, we actually do we have a monthly standing catch up,
Cool.
and only 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and we just at least try to connect every 15 minutes every month, and that just keeps our relationship intact. But we both thought that it would be great for us to just put that on our calendars. And we have not missed a meeting like in over 2 years of just kind of staying in contact. And I have to say that's been really helpful.
That's awesome. And then is that an insurance person as well? Or if you don't mind me asking, is it like a lawyer, accountant? I just didn't know, what type of person's helping you spin up your business, if you don't mind me asking.
That person, they're in the financial advisement
Okay,
business.
cool.
They're advisor. Hmm.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, I mean, it's the key contacts, the partnerships for non-traditional sales folks, centers of influence, like a hub contact who can get you, a lot of deal flows and opportunities. Um, it's funny. I have a group called Broker Brews, and we kind of hang out, every couple of months. It's been a little bit quieter during pandemic, but sometimes I fear it's not like targeted enough. But I've always had a hard time joining a leads group like a BNI that's very formulaic. It sounds like you found your own like organic way to consistency and intentionality. It might go back to the training thing a little bit, but just a positive routine, good feedback cycles. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned in cycling, for an example, I think I put out an article not
Mm,
too long
cool.
ago about what I learned in business by cycling. And one of the things that I really kind of caught when I was a part of the cycling group, I had never cycled before. This is
Oh
like three
wow.
years, and I was invited to like join the cycling group. So I went out, got a bike, and started learning. But one of the things I learned about how cyclists interacted, at least within the group that I was a part of in Florida, is that it was all about relationships, and
Cool.
all knew like each other. They knew each other's family. They knew like what each other was going through, whether it's personally, professionally, and people like even if they didn't see each other in a month, if someone took time off or they got injured and that person came back, they would still know like, oh, so how is your daughter doing, or how is you finishing up grad school, etc. And it was more of that relationship building, and I just saw how that just naturally kept the group like really intact. And we even saw that like while we were out cycling, but also in business, because there was a big correlation between cyclists doing business to
Hmm.
each other when it made sense. And so when I understood the relationship, and the work and sales is fine, and I've just never been a proponent of like sales, the quote
Right,
unquote
right. Similar. Yeah.
type of sales, where there's a methodology and you have to do this by this time and like following a program. And I'm sure some of those are great, and but as far as what I like and what has worked for me is just more of letting the relationship and the aspects of the relationship just kind of drive the progression.
I almost see that as more like a hunting or sorry, a farming and a cultivation rather than like a hunting. You still have to be proactive. You still have to ask for the order. I'm with you. I always joke that I hate the idea of selling a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. I'm like, that's lazy. Go find somebody who wants a ketchup popsicle. And if you do the right framing, you're almost not selling. Um, it's interesting. I feel like I've had more success almost around startups and finding fit than an insurance broker at times, which I have no complaints and I'm still honing my insurance craft. It is complex. But my favorite trick is instead of sales being like opposite sides of the table, trying to get to where you're looking together and you're kind of scripting. I see this as upside for you. I see this as upside for us. I think these two things can kind of dovetail and work together, and kind of pitching, kind of a shared vision as opposed to here's this today. That's kind of been one of my, I don't want to say like secrets to get the ball rolling, but still figuring out that insurance game. The insurance game is tricky. I always think one of the harder things is I feel like a lot of people can help us, but we can't necessarily always refer out. The best thing we can do is be a great professional, be timely, be considerate. But I don't know like if we get to give as often as we get in our game, which is kind of an interesting challenge. I don't know if you feel the same way or if you're able to reciprocate deal flow, a decent amount as well.
I don't know. I don't know. It's about reciprocity in that case. I think at least for me, I think what financial advisors, for an example, is
Hmm.
just looking to make sure that their clients have a good insurance
Hmm.
solution, and if that is what it takes, then I don't necessarily foresee that reciprocity is kind of like a mandate or
Yeah.
a give, at least in the type of business that I'm in in the insurance space.
Yeah, I think our give back has been really good pros in our business, which is interesting. I'm still working through all this, kind of learning myself. You know,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
What did If you don't mind, I feel bad because on a show. How'd you get into insurance originally? I know it's usually like a happy accident kind of career.
I know. I got into insurance. I started out as an Allstate agent,
Oh wow,
and
nice.
yeah, I wasn't looking to be an Allstate agent.
That's funny.
But I was graduating from high school in May, and that summer I was obviously off, and then I was going to start college in the fall. But my dad, being military, retired Air Force, he was saying, "You're not just going to just hang out around the house and play video games all summer." He goes, "You're going to go get a job." So I was like, "Okay." So all I knew is that I had to get a job because, like, my dad's very like regimented, like most military people. And so one, I was driving and I saw a sign on an Allstate building. I knew about Allstate, but I didn't really know what an agent did. And it said hiring. So all I knew was that I needed to get a job. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I called the number and I said, "Hey, what does it take for me to get a job?" And the gentleman there, Mitch, said that, "Oh, you have to have an insurance license." So he gave me the number of like a school to call, and that next day I was inside that class.
That's awesome.
License. 2
Yeah.
weeks later, I passed the exam, and just like if it wasn't on cue, he actually called me back. He remembered the number or wrote it
Cool.
down from caller ID and says, "Hey, I was just curious to know, did you ever take that class?" I said, "It's funny you mentioned that because I actually just passed the license." And he says, "Can you start tomorrow?"
Oh
And
wow.
I
That's
was in,
very serendipitous. You know.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
in the office the next day and I learned insurance. And here I am 16, 17 years later.
That's awesome. No, it's such like a funny, happy accident career. I always joke I had a buddy who was the same age, but I was a little more mature, could see a little further downfield. And he just mentioned insurance being a really good career path. I was selling, I think, office moves at the time. He was a finance major. Somebody at Cal State Fullerton pitched the insurance program to him. He didn't want it. His uncle's a successful insurance guy. Um, when I was selling office moves, there's actually a friend's dad who I always got along with really well. Just super nice guy. He turned out to have a great family agency, and I kind of hung my license there at first. I thought if I could insure a building or a suite, I know where the move projects were going to be, and it was a way to put my toe in the water. Only, sent a couple accounts his way, and then kind of went through some other programs for carrier access. But yeah, I love it. It's a happy accident industry for sure. Although there are some insurance majors now, which is interesting. See some young kids coming out super smart, and ready to go.
Yeah, I just interviewed Dexter Bell, which is
Cool.
also in my YouTube channel. And Dexter just graduated from Florida State University this
Nice.
past summer with his risk management and insurance degree. He also double majored in MIS, informational systems.
Oh wow.
He took a job as an underwriting trainee at a really good company in Chicago, and he's loving it. So I talked to him about his
Cool.
experience so far, and about being in the insurance major, and it's great.
We'll be working for Dexter one day. It's gonna be trouble. He's gonna.
Hey, I truly believe that
That's funny. No,
he's a
it's
rock.
so I think we're a similar cohort, age-wise. I think it's so interesting. I feel like I grew up in kind of like a little bit of an analog world, and then it kind of everything got digitized. So I feel like it's the best of both worlds, you know, kind of comfortable with all the tech, but got stuck having to hold a conversation with adults when we were a little kid, you know.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I guess I was fortunate enough. My dad, being in military, he was actually he worked in communications in the Air Force, and so we actually grew up with like one of the first DOS computers, and I remember the green screens and like DOS based programs. We had like the 3.5 slot floppy disk
Oh
that you
yeah,
have, and the AOL internet. And so I remember being at like the cusp of all of that. And I just really give a lot of credit to my dad for not only immersing me and my siblings
hmm
with that, but also kind of keeping us in the loop with what was going on. And even though we didn't want to sometimes, because
yeah.
we wanted to go outside and play, everyone to do things at school, and him keeping us up to speed with kind of technology. So naturally, like I build my own like personal computer, like my computers that I have now, I build them
That's
myself.
cool.
And yeah, so I love it.
Yeah, it's interesting to say that. We were pretty early. I mean, I remember computers with cassette tapes when we were really little, hard disks. My grandpa actually was a accountant. I remember like, laptop with, green letters on it. It's pretty fun.
Yep.
I always kick myself for not, learning to code more, being kind of tech heavier. I have a few things up my sleeve, directing servers, understanding APIs and such, but I don't know enough to be dangerous. I did have a friend who was a computer science major who ended up in sales because he was just too outgoing for a computer. So
Oh,
maybe if I really locked in, I would have been on the same path eventually, anyways. But
yeah.
yeah. And then congrats to, I saw recently NFP was the move over to that brokerage. They're really solid firm. I think of them as like a big global boutique. There's one account, my best friend's family company. I can't even wrestle it away from them. Those agents take care of them really well. But that was some cool news to see, and I know a great tribe to be a part of. Yeah.
I made the move from Florida up to the Virginia area and Metro DC, and it's been 90 days.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so time's just flown by, and getting used to the weather, and but nevertheless, it's been a pretty good start, and looking forward to 2022.
I kind of nerdily enjoy the Celtics a lot. I think it's just because I enjoy being a contrarian and bugging people in LA. But the Wizards are on a little bit of an unexpected tear right now. The Wizards aren't doing too bad.
No, they're not.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to see how they final finish up the season.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I always make comparison. I always say, so I was a long distance runner in high school. I run a little bit now, so kind of glutton for punishment there. And then I always love basketball in terms of sales training because it's like kind of confrontational. It's one on one, but it's also a team sport. Like you're responsible for yourself, but you still got to work together as well.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you look at some of the greatest teams ever now and even in the past. I mean, they've won those championships because they pulled together as a team. You
So
always have, yeah, you always have the rock stars of the team, but at the end of the day, they all have to pull together, and they all know it.
Well, Bill Simmons, I kind of nerd out on his stuff, of course, the Celtics, but we'll talk about the secret. The secret is people want to make each other better, people supporting each other, being there for each other. And if you can get that team rowing together, kind of get egos to the side, it's, amazing what you can see happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know why? That's because at that point, at least in my view, that builds a certain level of trust,
Hmm.
particularly in my field within the insurance industry as training. Even as a broker, a
Hmm.
big part of my job is educating and training. And from my experience so far, I've seen how training and education actually builds a certain level of trust between me and the person I'm actually training or group that I'm training.
Hmm.
Because whenever you can show someone or teach someone something new, and I also learn a lot from people that I train, and it just people they stick with you and they
Yep.
remember you because they've been able to do something different that they couldn't do before, and that sort of relationship and trust is something you can't break and you can't tear apart.
Well, there's no better way to learn than to teach, like it kind of, it stresses you, it pushes you. I don't know. I finally got to the point. So when I first started trying to sell insurance, I think I was ignorantly blissful. Oh, I'll just get these policies out. And then the more you know you don't know, and you kind of freak out a little bit. And then now I'm at the point where it's like, just try to sell the admitted products. If they don't want to write the admitted products, go to excess and surplus, go non-admitted, you're going to be fine. Trust the underwriters. The underwriters can tell you what needs to be in place and what doesn't need to be in place. So
Yeah.
I've kind of gone through my whole sales cycle, you know.
I mean, and things always evolve as we talked
Hmm.
about. And, so insurance is not agnostic to that. And so, back in the days when my aunt was a State Farm executive,
Cool.
she did very well. She's no longer with us.
Sorry.
God bless her soul. But agents back then, it was, to your point, it was very regimented in terms of let's see how many policies we can
Hmm.
write. Let's just sell. It was even door to door for
Yep.
like life insurance, and the many doors that you knocked on was kind of like the goal, right? But
Hmm.
over time, especially with technology, as you alluded to, that has kind of changed, and even in the mindset of customers
Hmm.
and policyholders, where that immediate, especially with a lot of the, and I hate to say it, but especially with a lot of the scams and the bad rap that
Yeah.
insurance got over the years, people are a little paused now, especially when they first meet a new insurance broker or agent, because it's not that they don't trust them. It's like they hear about some of the scams. So like I have to trust this person first. I have to know that this person has my best interest and my family's best interest before I just immediately sign up. So that sales process, what it used to be back in the day, like immediate when you first saw someone and knocked on your door, they probably would sign up for life insurance like right away. But now it's
Yeah.
kind of age, like maybe 30 days or 90 days until you can cultivate and further grow that trust level.
It's kind of tongue in cheek, but people even joke that insurance in general is a scam. We're like, all right, like your buddies and stuff. We're like, well, I keep the wheels of society rolling. You don't have insurance, things will blow up and go sideways pretty quick. Um, no, but it's fun. I enjoy it. I joke that I feel generally well liked by people, so that's why I got into insurance, to use that good social equity. I'm like, I'm generally well liked, so let's go do something that nobody. Just kidding. No, but I love it. For me, are you just on the property casualty side? I should know this ahead of time. I apologize for bugging on that, but
And I'll go back to that last point just to say insurance is the number one economic penny of like our economics in our economy. Insurance is number one. I mean, without insurance,
nothing happens.
yeah, and that's life insurance, health insurance, car insurance, home insurance,
Mhm.
because normal people wouldn't be able to essentially afford rebuilding their home like back to
Even
what
just
they
thinking
used to.
driving down the street without insurance, what you're risking.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
especially in states where there's a lot of accidents, more so than others. It just wouldn't you the economy wouldn't be able to sustain itself without insurance. So I would argue about the scam comment, but it's funny because I've had some people on some of my YouTube videos. Actually, one person that I can remember just say that he thought insurance was a scam, but that's to your point. That's what kind of the perception. It was a health insurance video, so it was kind of about health insurance. But that's just some of the perceptions that people may not have if they don't fully know and understand how that insurance product or program works.
It's only my best friend who says it, so I'm not sure what is. He's funny, and then it's good because your truest friends will give you the most honest speak. He's like, "What's least I can pay with being covered?" Like that's what he wants. It's like, all right,
Mhm.
it's funny.
All my closest friends understand insurance probably to the level that I do,
That's cool. That's awesome.
and I'm on the property and casualty side.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was wondering. So I'm probably 60% personal, 30 commercial, 10% life. And I got life for my last sales gig. It's kind of funny. I've lost that job, just started bartending more, started my own brokerage, but wasn't even something I was trying to get into. I just needed it for a sale that I was assisting with, legal reasons, compliance. And then I helped Fineo get licensed throughout the United States. And I needed, with that, I got more interest in life. I think I've sold 7 policies now. I really like it. Like I love PNC. I think PNC is really interesting and fascinating. But there's something pretty meaningful to the life side of the house too. It's cool, kind of hear stories, try to understand what you're protecting in the grand scheme of things. I feel like PNC is kind of like stacking bricks, and life health is almost like circles, kind of encompassing, you know, what's out there, what needs to be protected. But I enjoy both, and I see both as kind of different missions. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think now we can argue, or I could argue, life and health is also like stacking bricks, especially in light of the pandemic, because
Hmm.
both the life insurance industry, in addition to health insurance, has completely been disrupted, right? With the claims from the pandemic and just everything that came out of. So that's now also like stacking bricks in addition to PNC, and perhaps the two are some way informed, correlated, if you will, where you're building, and a broker and an agent is building a complete solution for
Oh yeah.
customers and clients.
Well, especially, I'm, 100% my own little LLC, so, and I have heard this play before. If anybody's starting a brokerage, you kind of do life first because you get the monies up front and you build the relationship, and then you can cross sell on the personal. And once that's rolling, you can get into commercial. That is kind of like a 101 for getting a scratch brokerage off the ground. Um,
Well, I think, and I would, Brett, and I would challenge and say that the number one product or program you go after is the one that the client needs the
Good
most.
point. Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
Because if you're offering what the client really needs, I mean, that should be priority. Then everything else follows
No,
afterward,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. It's sort of funny. It's almost like if you had a restaurant, you have the menu, but the customer still makes the decision. You could decide how many things you want to put on the menu, if it's going to be narrow or broad, but at the end of the day, you're serving
Well,
the customer.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we have to be good waiters and waitresses. We have to, number one, understand what the person sitting at the table, what their appetite is. Number
Right.
one,
Right.
if they're allergic to anything, if they like red or white wine, if
Yep.
they like steak or fish. And then as a waiter or waitress, we would, at least a good one, the ones I've been most pleased with, will then um, tell me what they think is best, and I actually go with that.
Well,
And
the
yeah,
joke.
because they've gotten to know me at least enough to where I feel comfortable with their recommendation.
Oh yeah, and they're gonna and ideally they're gonna know best. One of the better lines I've heard on the service industry side of the house was, "Order makers, not takers." So kind of help artfully bring it along, kind of be something people enjoy interacting with. I hear you for sure. Yeah, kind of play the game at a high level.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to also see even like call center jobs at like big call centers, whether it be AT&T or Verizon or Apple. They are they're a lot of the new positions are they're not being referred to as consultants or like service consultants or specialists, and not just like a representative, or
Yeah.
because there is more of a consultative approach like we talked about, where you're understanding and you're engaging with the customer or client to really kind of draft that overall solution for their needs.
And so I think even in those small things, even if you're working in a call center or whatever else, like if you're able to put a roof over your head, put bread on the table, and whatever you do, respect. You can have fun with it too. I still make cold calls to try to bring agents on for Fineo, help out the bottom line there, help recruit agents for Smart Choice, call them up. It's funny to say I'm known to our friends within the insurance world, but nobody cares when I call them. They don't care. It's broker Brett. You're looking to hear the tone. You're looking if they want to be fast or slow. You're trying to figure out a good time for them to talk, not when you want to talk. Try to get a sense of their agency, where there might be holes that you can fit in. And then my godfather, I'm half Mexican, so on the Catholic side, my godfather used to sell packaged goods, and he would say everyone's bored to tears. He'd bring funny little cards, trinkets. He's like, I don't care who you are, whoever you talk to the company, they're bored. Just come in, good personality, upbeat, you're going to be all right. And then my dad was a salesman, office moving salesman. He would look for something to like connect with in the room, and he was a big golfer, so he'd always wear golf shirts with nice country clubs on them. Because hate to say it, but small business, Southern California, half the time the guy's going to be a golfer anyways that you're trying to sell to. So that was always his hack as well. But it's it's the external, it's the person who's bored, it's the connection point. It's not about us. Um, so it's interesting. It's interesting being about the other while still maintaining the self, not being too much of a chameleon. You know. So.
Exactly. People still have to feel like you are a person. You're not
Mhm.
just a robot, and so there has to be like a mutual dialogue. But what we do get as insurance agents and brokers is our ear.
Mhm.
And if clients are talking or prospectors are talking, like, we need to be listening, and
Mhm.
that's we can offer or craft the best solution and continue those conversations by listening with the intent to kind of put together a best solution and see what's really the pain points of clients or perspectives, as opposed to listening with the intent to just respond, which happens often, when especially when I train or I do classes, or I used to do classes. That was kind of like the natural, was that
Yeah.
we're just like immediately trying to respond, whereas we should listen. I think once the clients realize that, and even us as the brokers, it just makes for a much better interaction.
It's funny you say that because I naturally have a little bit of ADD and I want to jump in and interrupt. I've worked really hard at it. The CEO of the moving company hated it. He's like, I'm going to get that out of you. Um, I've enjoyed my co-selling experiences. So I sold with my dad for 6 years, recruiting agents with Smart Choice, my buddy Spencer. I would kind of ride along with a newer rep for Fineo, kind of help out with more of the industry speak. But co-sales is always so interesting to me because you can kind of hear the close if you're just watching. It's sometimes when you're having to kind of drive and steer, it's a little bit harder. But there's been times I've been in there with another agent or somebody, I'm like, oh, this is the bright shining thing that matters. All this other stuff doesn't matter. This is their bottom line. It's kind of fun when you have those little light bulb moments.
I mean, if I was selling a car, if I was a car salesman,
Yeah.
that would, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But I don't. Insurance. My view is that insurance is not a product. It's
Yeah.
that you can see and touch and feel, and so it's more of a solution.
Yeah.
And I think once you have that right solution, that's the close, right? Having the best and right solution for the client's needs.
And
That's
this is
that close.
This might be education for me today too. Like I said, I'm a work in progress. I don't have any of this figured out yet. I sold
We're
off.
all work in
Yeah.
progress.
But no, I mean, and I'll almost half joking, like, sold copies for a year, office moves for 6 years, worked in restaurants, and I'm still very much evolving as an insurance broker. Like my agency is small and I take pride in having my own little LLC, doing business taxes. It's been a really cool learning experience. And I would say less daunting than I would have thought from the other side. It turns out just have a few trusted professionals, be very candid, almost like going to the doctor, when you're talking to your banker or your lawyer, whatever else, and they'll take care of you, and then just got to go out there and get the business. I've been blessed in that I don't have to sprint to try to write business to keep a roof because there's a couple projects that kind of help me keep the lights on. So I get to build my brokerage well, but I may have been thinking too much in a product sale as opposed to a service sale. So who knows? Yeah, this could be the title of today's. you know, um, it's pretty fun.
It's just my philosophy, my
Yeah,
view based off my experiences.
and
Yeah,
that's success. I mean, I know you're not going to pat yourself on the back. I'll say it. Like you definitely, you know, it's cool.
far from perfect.
Yeah, no, we're all work in progress. I make a point to say that regularly because I'm enjoying sharing my journey. But like I said, I wouldn't pretend to have everything figured out just yet. I'm lucky I dinked around startups before and kind of understand tech pretty good. So I'm having a good time
Yeah,
taking our broker world and kind of trying to share some of that with the tech world. Um,
yeah.
but to me, the pinnacle is going to be being a great agent. Building that
Oh,
book.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially as you mentioned with the tech world, if customers can go online, there's a ton of companies you can just look up and write your policy directly online. If those solutions are already out there and it's just more happening as we speak, the brokers and agent have a much better reason, right, and
yep,
use case to be more consultative and to
yep,
be more relationship based, because that is what you can't get from, in my view, you can't get from the online portals. I think there's a place and time for
yep.
the online insurance, absolutely, but the brokers and agents, in my view, really have more of a use case with the consultative
Yep.
solution based insurance.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Selfishly, the portals are going to do some like low hanging fruit right now, but I think in terms of customer experience, understanding what's going on, getting the insurance to fit the client, I don't think we're going anywhere. You
No,
know,
not that. You can't
and,
replace that. Yeah.
when people talk about DSC, I'm like, I really think we're still relatively inexpensive, whether it's 10 to 15%. We're sales, we're customer service. I think our 10 to 15%, if you don't spend it on the agent, and this is kind of soapbox, you're spending it somewhere else. Somebody still has to answer that phone, somebody still has to answer that email, and then when you have folks like ourselves who can kind of bespoke the policies to the need, yeah, I'm happy. I think our long-term game is still there. I do think there'll be something to facilitating that online experience for me as a broker or an agency. Well, I just would want guardrails. If somebody can buy something automatically on my name, I want to make sure I have some control over what they can buy, and if they want to go below what I think are reasonable coverages, I at least want to talk to them first, you know and
Well,
vice
yeah,
versa.
because that's
Yeah,
potentially your errors and omission. If someone
yeah,
go on your website and buy insurance and they happen to buy something that's not in compliance with the state or is below what they really need, I mean, you're the broker of record or
yeah.
potentially the broker of that. So that's completely understandable, and I think that's a great point of, as a broker agent, integrating some of those technologies to complement what you offer to customers is, I think that's a great idea for brokers and especially smaller brokers and agents to look into.
Oh yeah, of course. We're gonna have to use some tech, but like you said, it's not gonna replace this. It's not gonna replace relationship conversation. It's gonna
No,
take a while.
at least not within my lifetime.
Yeah, right. Same,
Yeah,
same.
I think the
Yeah,
artificial intelligence right now, especially you look at some of the autonomous vehicles, the artificial intelligence is immaculate. I mean, it's near like perfect, but it's not perfect. But I don't foresee artificial intelligence, at least within my
I'll
lifetime.
say I got 30 years. It always takes a while for technology to get to insurance, even if that curve up goes a little quicker. So one of my hacks or tricks too is PNC seems to be a little ahead of life. So it's been kind of fun being around PNC first. And then life, the technology is a little behind. So I can kind of see what works for us and then share some of those ideas on the other side of the house. But that's a whole other topic. Um, yeah, man, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you kind of, speaking truth about what it means to be a good salesperson, what it means to take care of your clients, be consultative, like, you know, begin with their needs, it's not about what we're selling,
No, it's not. I mean, I think it's important for us to know what we're offering, what we're
Hmm.
selling. We have to understand our product. We have to
Hmm.
understand what it does, because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that it will respond in the event the client has something unforeseen happen. So I think again that consultative, that educator, every agent broker is an educator, whether
Hmm.
you know it or not. We're all educators in some way, shape, or form, and that's why we have continuing education as a part of our
Hmm.
license. We have CE that we have to do because we have to stay up to date with what's happening so that we can offer the best to clients. And did you know errors and emissions losses since the pandemic are up like 13, 14%?
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I've just seen E&O policy costs go up. I know that you were correlated. Um, yeah, I'm not surprised. It's a weird year, 2 years. I kind of say it was almost like fog of war. Um, yeah, I'm not surprised. Knock
And
on
you,
wood.
we also
Yeah.
we also had a lot of new entrants, right? We had a
Yeah.
lot of people that were in certain businesses that were in limbo, like that's the restaurant business, the
Hmm.
so many different industries, tourism and travel and hotel, where people were looking for other careers, and so
Hmm.
we did have a new entrance to the industry, people looking to become an agent. And I know this. I have even on my YouTube channel, a lot of feedback that I've gotten are from people that are getting their license,
Oh
right?
wow.
And so I'm only saying this based off that experience. So we had a lot of new entrants and people getting their license. And if they're put in a situation where they're working, they may not have enough training, right? Because we're not in person or they weren't in person. Or maybe companies were still developing their online training for people that were working remote. And perhaps some way, shape, or form, uh, m- you know, mistakes were made and the way errors and omissions had to kick in. But I think that just furthers increases the awareness of a lot of companies now that we got to continue to invest in training programs for our new employees and current employees. And in my view, as also being the previous chair of the Society of Insurance Trainers and Educators, I always said, in my view, and it still remains, that training should never be the first department to be cut if you're downsizing. Training should be the last department, in my,
Yeah.
because when you have a downsizing, you already have morale issues with people in the company, and so training is kind of the only thing that really keeps people somewhat positive, right?
I
Or
was,
engaged with the company.
I was gonna say if you're gonna have fewer warriors, it better have better warriors. If you're like cutting down the ranks, you better be ready to fight a little harder. Um, Yeah, yeah. It's just so crazy. There's, like you said, there's so much to learn. Know, and kind of one of the last little plugs I'll give is the insurance nerds community. I would not be nearly as bold as I am, and I got to make sure you're in that Slack. If I didn't have friends I could lean on all the time, and I refer out probably as much business as I write, just to make sure it gets into capable hands. But that's the other cool thing. I would say, like, so impressed, still by some of the smartest and nicest people I've met, most ambitious people I've met have been around insurance, very kind of holistic thinkers, long-term thinkers. It is funny. It is very interesting. I was gonna make a bad joke, be like, it's funny around normal people, I'm conservative, but around insurance folks, I'm like liberal and wild. So it's a good place for me to hang out. I get to be you know, the outgoing one. But
Yeah,
it's fun. I love our little insurance community. It's great. Yeah.
yeah. The insurance community, is particularly insurance nerds,
Yeah.
just continues to offer a great platform and a place for people, whether you're new or you're seasoned in the industry, to stay connected with folks and bounce ideas. I think the education that you do, whether it be through podcasts or books or articles, that is just oh so needed. And I think a lot of people have found enormous value from that. So kudos to you and the Insurance Nerds team and Tony for keeping that going and having folks like myself involved in the Society of Insurance Trainers and Educators. I just think it's just it's great. Now, and so not everyone in the business is going to be a part of it, but I have to say there are a lot of, even though people may be silent or may not be as visible, there are a lot of smart people in the industry
Hmm.
that are not part of a lot of the online platforms. But some of my greatest mentors are people you probably never heard of, but they, they're some great people and smart people in the industry.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'll give one last plug to CPCU Society. They're always trying really hard, and I was joking around with my friend Precious the other day that I feel like if it's Lord of the Rings, they're like the elves, like the really refined, like kind of heady part of the group, But there's a lot of different great tribes in our little circle. But
I love the Lord of the Rings, so that was a good analogy.
appreciate it. Like, thanks so much for talking to me today, invited me on, and look forward to continuing the conversation for sure.
I had a one last question for you,
Oh
Brett.
yeah.
What are you looking most forward to for next year?
So the main startups I help, Fineo kind of being the big one, Marble is going well. I'm having fun recruiting agents for Smart Choice. So I feel like those bases are covered. Um, to not feel personally full of crap, I want to build my own agency. Right now I have a handful of policies, commercial, a handful of personal, a handful of life accounts. I want to see if I can, set up a productive mousetrap, maybe get a little more organized than I've ever been. My goal by 1/1/22 was for anybody to look under the hood and things to look clean, whether it's QuickBooks being organized, CRM solutions being organized, AMS systems being organized. I'm just calling myself out. I want to, shred some documents, organize some things. That sounds bad, actually, not shredding anything, get rid of anything. But there's a couple piles of paper I'd like to organize. I've been moving in a few directions, and I feel like the bases are covered well. I know I'm doing on things I'm helping other people out with. I'd like to work on my own shingle a little more. So that's my 2022. And thank you for starting me off on the right foot today, and help me get the right mindset for it.
Of
Yeah.
course, and I'll just say at least, and I'm always working on this myself. But I learned a while ago, and I wasn't always good at it. Was the importance of goal setting and
Hmm.
planning. And I always thought it was so cliche to have like goals and to write things down, but it actually does keep you on track with what you want to focus on. And goals aren't 100%. They may
Hmm.
not always go according to how you plan, but at least knowing what you're working toward will certainly give you a better success rate. If you didn't have those goals or you didn't know what you're working toward, it's like running a race.
Yeah.
uh, do you think you would be as amped or excited to run a race if you didn't know where the finish line was?
Well, to your point, I kind of gutted out that half marathon, and I say very humbly got a 2:03. There were some pacers that had a little, had a line for 2:05, and I was like, I'll just keep an eye on these guys, and it was that simple. And I'll give a shout out to my buddy Lonnie too, because I really had not been running a lot, and I just want to do a sub 2.5 hour half marathon, which might have been like
Oh,
11:30 splits,
yeah.
just for like pride's sake. And Lonnie's like, stop it. He's like, just run your race, So I kind of got out there. I was feeling good. I usually run on trails, and I think I always underestimate how much faster you are on the road. And I ran like a 2:03. But to your point, it was the Pacers, and I knew that they were dialed in. So I was like, if I can keep an eye on these guys, then we'll turn in a pretty hardy race. And it actually wasn't even on purpose. I was like running, and I realized like there was like 2:05 pace. I was like, really? All right, just kind of hanging in there,
Yeah.
keeping on the
Or that's
goal.
why, yeah. And
Yeah,
that's why people have the watches
yeah.
now that will tell them how if they're on track.
Hmm.
And those runners, they do really good because they stay at that. They may have intervals if they're really looking to compete, but if normal, they're just people are saying this is my pace rate, and I'm going to stick to my pace rate according to my watch. And their success rate is far better than those who. And this is in like running magazine
Yeah,
that says that, and so that's why the watches and the timers are really helpful to kind of stick to those goals and finish.
I'll take it. So then maybe that'll be our takeaway for 2022. We got to
What?
get those goals lined up, some consistency, that'll be the
Yeah,
theme, especially as things open back up. I can't wait to kind of get like, I'll call it normal swings at society. I'm excited I'm out in California, so it's been a
well,
mixed
yeah,
bag.
especially in California.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back to some normalcy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
will add to that one more thing, Brett. Is so one is goals, but two is of course staying on track of those goals. But three, I would say share those goals with at least one person that
Yep.
you trust. And like, I'm actually meeting with one of my close friends later this week. And that meeting is basically for us to talk about something that I asked him to hold me accountable
Cool.
to in January. And I said, on this date, no, he actually said, on that date, I want us to follow up. And so
Yeah,
he was almost like holding me accountable to a goal that I was setting.
that's a good
And
friend.
yeah, for the past 3 months, it's like being like taking a test, knowing you have an exam coming up. You're like
Yeah.
rushing to make sure, like, oh, am I gonna? And so, but it keeps you on track of just having that accountability. And then I also put a YouTube video out in March about some of the goals that I wanted to do for YouTube, and I wanted to actually do more content. And
Cool.
so when I put that video out in March, and people started watching it and commenting and supporting, I'm like, okay, I actually have to stay on track with my goals. So those folks were actually holding me accountable in a roundabout way. And so I would just also say, find some. It doesn't have to be a YouTube, but it
Yep.
just one person you trust that you tell about your goals and that can help hold you accountable to them.
Well, and to your point about communicating, it's funny. I lost a job like 3.5 years ago. Was kind of like in limbo for a minute, and then just decided to lever up on bartending and start my own brokerage. But it was two good friends who sort of called me out and were like, "What are you doing?" I was basically sleeping in all summer, and it was two friends who woke me up, and it was one of those same buddies who kind of gave me the insight of kind of leaning into helping the startups because he thought my temperament was a good crossover to that. But yeah, share your struggles with your friends. Have people who know what you're working on. Nobody, what is it? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. It's all,
Absolutely.
this stuff's complex. You're not gonna figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
It's a balance because it's on you. No one's gonna solve your problems, but also you're not gonna know everything. So, work with people, So
Absolutely.
it's good stuff. But no, thank you so much, Lair, for the idea to hop on and really appreciate it. Look forward to continuing conversation. I'll share some of my goals and ideas on a side channel with you.
Okay.
Always good
Sounds
to have
good.
accountability buddies.
And likewise. And
Perfect.
likewise. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks, guys.
All right. See ya.
Bye.